Welcome back to the channel, Starseekers. My name's Luke, and today we're going to be taking a look at Tormented Souls on the Nintendo Switch, a classic survival horror game modelled after titles such as Resident Evil and Silent Hill, which sees you exploring an abandoned mansion turned hospital whose halls and corridors are filled with ungodly abominations. But the question here is, why were you summoned here, and who are the twin girls you find yourself searching for? Well, you're going to have to keep your nerves if you want to find out. So let's take a look at whether this one's worth your time and money, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy my content and want to see more. So I'm going to try and avoid spoilers the best I can with this one for obvious reasons, but the game opens with you, Caroline Walker, receiving a mysterious envelope containing a picture of two girls, whose sender is identified as John Doe from Wildberg Hospital, and so off you head to go and investigate. Now, who Caroline is or why she's taken it upon herself to go on a bit of an investigation is not disclosed at this point, but upon arrival at the mansion in the dead of night, she's then knocked unconscious and awakens naked in a bathtub and one eye short of a full set of peepers. Now, as you work your way through the game, you'll slowly uncover more information about the creepy old hospital mansion and about the history of its occupants, including the girls in the photo, and this is done in classic Resident Evil fashion through a ton of different documents left strewn all over the place. Now, you also meet a couple of other individuals in the mansion who disclose some additional information, and the plot itself is a little complex with a number of different story elements going on, but thankfully you can reread any of the documents you've obtained from the inventory menu. Overall, while it's not the most original plotline here, I'd still say it's quite an intriguing one, and I enjoyed the way that it was drip fed to you throughout the game, requiring you to slowly piece together each individual story, and while I didn't get to see it through to its conclusion and still had many questions by the time I stopped playing, I thought that it was pretty decent and it kept me invested throughout my time playing. Now, before we get into the gameplay, I'm just going to clarify in case you missed it, but I didn't actually end up finishing Tormented Souls, and so I'm not going to be rating the game in this review. I'll get into exactly why this is shortly, but after about 5 hours worth of gameplay, I'd say that I was about 3/4 of the way through, so I'd say that I've experienced enough of the game to share my thoughts and opinions about it. So gameplay wise, if you played the classic Resident Evil games, specifically the first and the second, where you're working your way through the mansion and the police station, then Tormented Souls sticks very close to the formula of these games, though of course instead it's set in a mansion, part of which has been converted into a hospital. I'll also add now that the classic tank controls have been replaced by standard directional movement in this one, which is either a good or a bad thing depending on your preference. Now, the general format of the gameplay in this one sees you exploring the mansion/hospital in search of answers. Why you don't just try to escape after your eyeball has been stolen is beyond me, but Caroline is a bit of an hard bastard and she's determined to get to the bottom of things, and so your primary objective in the game is to investigate who the twins are. Working your way through the corridors and rooms of this building, you'll find all kinds of documents lying about which hint about who these girls are and what happened in the mansion, but in order to actually progress, once again in classic Resident Evil style, you'll have a bunch of locked doors to contend with, plenty of puzzles to solve, and a ton of big ugly nasties to avoid or shoot, depending on your ammo count. Now, the monsters in the game predominantly come in the form of mutilated corpses which shuffle along the floor, wheel themselves around in wheelchairs, or are sometimes found strapped to walls, and while there isn't a great deal of variety to these, with most of them only having melee attacks, encountering them is still cause for alarm, as ammo and health packs are in short supply and enemies take a lot of shots to put down. Now, in terms of defending yourself, the game offers up a few different makeshift weapons which are clear substitutes for things like pistols and shotguns, and it's basically a case of aim and shoot, with you being able to dodge backwards by hitting the Y button whilst aiming. One defining feature about this one though is that you're not actually able to fire your weapons whilst standing in the dark, and I'm not entirely sure on the lore about this one, but spending too long in the dark will result in instant death as you're dragged away kicking and screaming. For a good part of the game, your only source of light in the darkness is a Zippo lighter, which does on occasion prove problematic when you encounter enemies barring your way, as you're only able to equip one item at a time. Now when it comes to the puzzles in the game, these range from being pretty simple to quite obscure, but for the most part I'd say they're all solvable with a little brain work, and on the odd occasion a little thinking outside the box. I did enjoy the variety of the puzzles in this one though, with some requiring you to find a specific item, while others require you to interact with items in your inventory in certain ways, and there are also environmental puzzles in the game. But one of the more unique puzzle mechanics involves a spot of time travelling, which I won't go into any further detail on, but I thought was a really cool concept. Now there's not a whole lot more to say really with this one. Horror wise it's traditional survival horror at its best, with the odd jump scare thrown in there for good measure. And for the most part I really enjoyed playing this one, as I was a huge fan of Resident Evil back in the day, and for me this game successfully captures the classic feel of those games. That feeling of tension when entering into a room and hearing footsteps and scraping metal is as effective as it ever was, making you stop in your tracks for a moment and slowly edge forward, hoping that the camera angle will then give you a glimpse of what's ahead. And the back and forth gameplay, while somewhat tedious at times, is very much a key feature in these games, and was definitely to be expected and enjoyed for what it was. Overall though, I'd say that if you've missed the classic survival horror format and have been looking for a game on the Switch to scratch that itch, and a survival horror which is actually good, then Tormented Souls will not disappoint. What I will say though is that the game is not without its issues, so just wait until you've heard about these before you decide whether or not to purchase. So the visuals and audio in Tormented Souls are definitely one of its main highlights. The mansion in which the game's set gives off some real Resident Evil vibes, the enemies are very Silent Hilly in their appearance, and the overall quality of the visuals is good, with the texture quality and environmental details remaining decent throughout. I also felt the game's developer did a really great job of recapturing the look and feel of those classic survival horror games, with some great use of the fixed camera angles to restrict players' viewpoints and build tension. When it comes to the audio, the sound design is also top notch, with some nice ambience and sound effects to really keep you on edge, especially when you can hear the enemy movements but aren't able to see them. And the game's music has that classic Resident Evil sound to it. You've got some calming piano tunes playing in safe areas, with the rest of the soundtrack consisting of dark and foreboding low strings and piano keys, with panic-inducing beats kicking in whenever you encounter an enemy. So performance wise, I'd say that the game holds up pretty well considering the quality of its visuals, and while there are some semi-frequent frame rate drops, they never dip too low that the game becomes unplayable, though you also get some texture popping every so often, which is a bit of an eyesore. When it comes to issues, well, now here's where we come to why I didn't end up finishing this one, and it really comes down to two things. The first of these being the game's save system, which again mimics Resident Evil, with you having to find tape reels and a tape recorder in order to save your game. While this in itself isn't really an issue and is all part of the experience, whilst playing Tormented Souls, the game hard crashed on me on 5 different occasions, and due to the tape reels being quite hard to come by, I used my saves sparingly, and so each crash resulted in me losing around 20 minutes worth of progression. The lack of any kind of action log made this even more frustrating, as prior to a crash I'd moved backwards and forth and done a ton of different things, and so then I had to try and remember where I was up to and what I'd actually done each time I loaded up a save file. Now while it isn't exactly a solution, an autosave system would have reduced the effects of these crashes, and it also could have provided a bit of accessibility as the game is pretty tough. Losing progression through deaths is just as frustrating, and just having multiple difficulties would have also helped, with something like more frequent item drops on easier difficulties, but unfortunately as it is, the game contains no difficulty settings. When all's said and done though, despite its current issues, Tormented Souls is still a great game. It has some enjoyable but challenging gameplay, and stays very true to its survival horror roots. If I were to actually rate the game in its current state, it'd be getting 2 or 3 stars at a push, but if they're able to patch the crashes, it's easily a 4-star game, and it's definitely one of your best options if you're looking for a classic survival horror game on the Switch. And so that just about wraps up this review of Tormented Souls on the Nintendo Switch. As always, make sure to hit that like button if it helped you out. Let me know your thoughts and opinions on the game down in the comments section below, and if you watch my content regularly but are not yet subscribed, then please consider doing so. For now though, I just want to thank you all once again for watching, and until next time, take care of yourselves and game on.